Good evening, Dark Tiders. Barely functioning cogitator here with an Ogryn build guide especial. I've been getting several requests for Ogryn since I launched my channel, and I've been trying to record this for a little while now, but due to the computer issues that I am still having, and the fact that, honestly, I just didn't feel ready to make this video, I've put it off. I now feel confident enough in Ogryn to make this video. It's not as though I don't feel like I have a good handle on Ogryn. I felt like I was a pretty above average skill level player, and I have definitely above average knowledge, but you know, there's just certain weapons that I didn't have experience with, certain builds I didn't have experience with. Like a lot of top level players, I just hadn't played enough Ogryn, and I now feel confident enough to do so. Before we start anything, I do want to also say, you know, there's a good reason why a lot of your favorite top level players don't play Ogryn. I constantly get that question in DMs and in comments and stuff like that, like why does no one play Ogryn? The reason why no one plays Ogryn is because it's slow. That is the long short of it. There's a variety of other reasons, such as issues with its kit, heavy slowdown drawbacks, the fact that Ogryn doesn't specialize in anything and is more of a jack of all trades. There's a lot of bugs with a lot of Ogryn's weapons. Its blessings aren't very compelling, and blessing choice isn't very compelling. A lot of the talents, the terminology, and the verbiage in those talents is not consistent with the other classes. Even within Ogryn itself, you have to shift the way that you play from other classes. You can't get away with certain things that you can with other classes. There's some issues with hitboxes, with displacers, and trappers and disablers, rather. There's a lot of reasons not to play Ogryn. But I think if you are willing to give Ogryn your time, you want to play Ogryn at a high level, and you put that effort in, Ogryn is a very, very strong class that you can play competently, and you can compete with the other classes in terms of numbers and overall effectiveness if given the opportunity to do so and being in the right environment. That being said, you know, Ogryn is a jack of all trades class. I used to think that that is veteran, but in preparation of this video, I have now come to the conclusion that Ogryn is just full stop the best at it. You were kind of good at everything and not the best at anything. All of the other classes are capable of dealing with their respective damage, I guess, groupings, like whether or not we're talking about like Trauma Staff being the best at Horde Clear, or I don't know, like Plasma Gun Vet, not necessarily being the best, but one of the best for Elite and Special and Disabler Prio, everything like that. You were never going to, you know, beat them in getting those specific yellow numbers, but you were going to be good at all of those things pretty consistently. You have very good survivability. You are quite good at displacing enemies, excuse me. Not as good as other builds, but quite good at displacing, and your wave clear is exceptional. Not as good as others, but exceptional. So with all that being said, we're going to talk about all of the weapons, how they relate to the meta builds, curios, the different camps of thought and schools of thought for those curios, and how I like to build them. We're going to go over all the different talents, things that you can do for ease of use within these builds to make them a little bit better while you're learning, and just generally if you're a lower skill player, excuse me, and things that you can do if you want to eke out a little bit more optimization, some, you know, things for thought in terms of the Ogryn talent tree and things like that. That being said, there is a very high chance I will make a mistake or two within this build for the reasons that I mentioned before. I think that it is very difficult, although Ogryn is a class that is heavily documented, probably arguably the most documented class because of how exhaustive Ogrynomicon is as a resource. There's still a lot of room for error with this class. If I do make a mistake, just put a reply in the comments on my pinned comment. If it's factual, objective, and I do sincerely get something wrong, I will edit either the video or just my pinned comment to reflect that thing. Unless it's, you know, like a major change, I might pull it down, whatever, we'll see. But anyways, let's start with weapons first. So I think if you were learning Ogryn, it is best for you to either play one of these two weapons, this more so with Tauntgryn than Bullgryn, and this more so with Bullgryn than Tauntgryn. But if you want to get quite good and be very effective, I think that the pickaxe is going to be Ogryn's best weapon. There is a lot of debate between these two weapons. I think that it is difficult for me to make this comment, and I think that if you prefer Slab Shield, that's fine, and I do think it is also an S tier weapon. But I like the variety of pickaxe. This is much more fun to me. This is capable of outputting more than this. This, however, has ease of use on its side. It is a very good defensive weapon. It's very, you know, consistent with pushing, blocking. If you want to go into the taunt push block environment and focus on like team support and utility, this is a very good weapon. It's just very consistent, but it's also very boring, in my opinion, and it takes up a bunch of my screen, and I find it annoying. You know, also something to note is that you can push up on like shooting galleries with this weapon with your special. You should never like just drop this and hold special action, but dodge sliding into special action, drawing aggro on ranged enemies with your block and push taunt talent, and then like keep pushing in until you can displace them is like a good strategy, especially if you don't have Bullgryn or Bull Rush Indomitable. I like this weapon more though. The conversation always becomes which pickaxe is the best. And honestly, I am here to say whichever one you like the most is what is going to be best for you. I think for these weapons, you enjoying the way they feel is far more important than their actual effectiveness. I am going to talk about what I believe is optimal and what I believe is best, but honestly, any of these three could be argued as an S tier weapon. Most people consider the Karsolas the best one. I consider the Borovian the best one for me personally. We're going to get into all that, but why do I like the Borovian the best? I like the Borovian the best because it's the best of both worlds. You get decent wave clear. You don't have to really like put in extra effort to get one-shot breakpoints or consistent good TTKs in comparison with the Karsolas. It does automatically free up a perk slot because, in my opinion, you should always run Carapace with Karsolas just to get more consistent breakpoints, depending on your secondary on Crushers and Maulers. This weapon doesn't need that to get consistent breakpoints on Crushers and Maulers, so it does free up another perk slot for Unyielding or Maniac. To me personally, Unyielding is always going to be better than Carapace or Maniac on this weapon, even though Carapace gives more consistent breakpoints, as does Maniac for Maniac enemies, simply because you just don't need it. With good like buff usage and everything, you are capable of getting very consistent breakpoints and TTKs on these targets already with this weapon. It is good at wave clear. Unyielding allows you to get better breakpoints and better TTKs on Reaper's Bulwarks and just better damage on bosses, which allows you to hit higher damage numbers with Thrust, Head Taker or Slaughter, and your Strike Down heavy. I think this is almost always going to be better. To demonstrate what I mean, we'll talk about the blessings later, but let's say, you know, almost always with this weapon, you're going to have Thrust and Head Taker or Slaughterer. We'll talk about other options later, but Thrust or Head Taker and Slaughterer. So any good Ogryn is going to have these up almost 100% of the time, unless there's like a real lull in gameplay. And without Carapace on the weapon as is, and Thrust, you are able to get a one-shot breakpoint, excuse me, rather consistently with your strike down from this weapon. And even with just like H2, it's pretty much a one-shot. You can do like, sorry, I'm gonna have to do this to get this back up. You can do this into a light and get a very consistent TTK. Alternatively, if you do have these two stacked, you can also make use of Loyal Protector to get a very consistent breakpoint, a one-shot breakpoint. That wasn't, but it will be with like 2 thrust stack or 3 thrust stack or any number of buffs that you're gonna get from other allies as well. Keep that in mind. Trying to get consistent breakpoints with the Karsolas is far more annoying than it is with the Borovian, and getting one-shot breakpoints on Maulers and Crushers is just very easy without Carapace, which is why I don't do it, is the long short of it. How are you going to use this weapon? You're going to use this weapon either by doing this for wave clear, which is heavy into light 1. Another reason why I like the Borovian over the Karsolas, the Borovian doesn't require you to go into special to get your second strike down, which is just really consistent for dealing like with mixed hordes, because you can do this and then there's a Crusher and we do this, or a Mauler, whatever it is, or Maniacs too. That's the other thing I was going to mention. Notice I don't have Maniac on my weapon. The thing I always see people saying is like, oh, I don't like the Borovian because it's less consistent than the Branx in getting Mutant and Rager kills. You could just do this. I think even like without Thrust, this one-shots, it does. So I just don't think it's necessary. And like even more so, if you have both of these up, I think actually even, here, let's test it. By the way, sorry, this is going to be a long video. There's going to be lots of like active testing in this video. If you don't like that, then I don't know. Yeah, you can get pretty much one-shot breakpoints. I think if you get like 3 thrust, even on this like first heavy, okay, and you don't get a cleave, excuse me. Sorry, guys. that undoubtedly one-shots, I think. I'm not going to test it for the third time. This video is going to be a little difficult just because testing with these weapons is a little bit weird. Yeah, that's a one-shot. So you're able to get a one-shot with Thrust 3 and that anyways. This becomes even more consistent if you're using Loyal Protector, and you have so much stagger that you're going to be able to push over a group of Ragers a majority of the time anyways, so you're not going to get punished as often with it, and you could just do this with a light, and that bleed's going to kill a majority of the time. The other thing, too, is I am taking Head Taker, so I have lower overall strength. If you do use Slaughter over Head Taker, you do get a one-shot breakpoint with this and Loyal Protector on these and this very consistently, even with like low heavy hitter stacks. This is the best of both worlds in a weapon. It's very, very good. A couple things to note. Your special obviously is important because it leads to a strike down, but it also gives you a damage increase on most targets, which allows you to get very consistent breakpoints. That's why a lot of better Ogryns with this weapon are using the strike down. It's not so much to enter heavy 2 as consistently, but rather to get that 10% increase on certain targets. You can also do a light combo, which is pretty good if you have 5 stacks of heavy hitter out of your slide. Something to note. The other thing that I see a lot of Ogryns doing with this weapon that is wrong is if you sprint with this weapon while holding heavy, you always go into this like kind of like forward slash. Regardless of where you are in your attack combo, let's say I go strike down, if I sprint, this cancels. And a lot of people naturally are sprinting as they're doing heavies because they're used to CB and stuff like that. It's going to mess up things because, for one, this is super slow. You see the drawbacks, slow speed. And two, you want your strike downs, right? They're really important in certain situations if you want to be an effective user of this weapon. So keep all those things in mind. This is 90% of the time the weapon that I am using on Ogryn as it is described here. What about blessings? Why is thrust important? Thrust is important just because it gives us more consistent breakpoints, and you have to charge up a majority of the time, and it kind of leads into like, even if you get like one thrust stack because you hold just a little bit too long and don't do like perfectly optimal H1s, the damage differential and breakpoints you get on certain enemies is just very consistent just from that. So it doesn't require you to really change your play up to get good damage out of it. Also, like I said, you get better boss damage out of it and better one-shot breakpoints, two-shot breakpoints for certain characters. Why, and I already know a lot of people are going to argue this, why am I taking Head Taker over Slaughter? Personally, for me, there's lots of periods I take Slaughter over Head Taker. I like Head Taker over Slaughter, excuse me, because almost all targets get their one-shot breakpoint by having 5 Head Taker already, and Head Taker is a hit rather than a kill, so you can use your special to get it up for one, or just to maintain it if it's about to run out. Lights also work, which is something of note, and the other side of it as well is what is the other side of it? Why do I do this? Why do I like this? The other side of it as well is it's just like more consistent to always have uptime on. So it's less likely that I drop these stacks in certain situations. I like too that if, like, let's say I no longer have an infested horde around me, or a horde of, like, you know, unarmored enemies, and suddenly it's just a crusher pack or a rager pack. I like that, like, I don't have to kill in order to get this back up. I can just hit something or pull something. It's very, very consistent. I really, really like it. And I think that Slaughter in most situations is going to be overkill. If you are trying to optimize to high heavens, technically speaking, yes, Slaughter is better, especially if you're not going to take a Maniac as a perk. I would say for perfect ease of use, Head Taker, Thrust, Flak, Maniac is going to give you the easiest experience and let you reach the most breakpoints as possible without, like, you actually trying. You know, I think, like, there's so many different options here that you can talk about. I also think, like, there's a conversation to be had for just using Torment if you like the special hit and you're going to use it often enough. I also think that Confident Strike could also be a conversation. If you wanted to tell me that you didn't want to take Thrust and you wanted to take Slaughter or Confident Strike for ease of use, or just to be like more of a frontliner, I think that's fine. Wrath isn't worth using with this weapon. It's kind of worth using with the Chrysalis, just because it's so good on wave clear already, but I find that it ends up being sort of overkill and unnecessary. Let's say you want to use the Karsolas instead. It does change a lot of how you interact with this weapon. If you're going to do that, I am going to say to you almost always, you're going to want to go Flak Carapace rather than Flak Unyielding, because you do need that Carapace damage to get good TTKs on Crushers and Maulers. And you do also want to switch up how you play. So it's either you do Light 1 into Heavy 2 for clear, or Heavy into Lights. One thing that the Karsolas does have over the Branx and the Borovian is that you can do heavy 1 into heavy 2 for a pretty reliable horde clear option, especially with heavier stagger if you're faced with ragers and things like that. It also does allow you, if you're taking like increased damage from gunners, or you're in a situation where you need to get the horde off you, but you're going to take damage, this is going to generate more toughness because of our toughness talents than either of the other weapons are capable of doing, unless, of course, like I said, with Borovian, you're doing this into the other strike down. That's neither here nor there. I think it's very good, and if you wanted to make an argument that this is the best weapon, that's fine, and I think that you are probably maybe right, but I think it just depends on the player. In terms of blessings themselves, the only major difference is either you can go Slaughter or Thrust. I would not take Head Taker with this build because you do need the extra strength from Slaughter to like have a consistent experience, or you can do Slaughter or Wrath, which is totally fine. You get an extra, I believe it's like an extra unarmored on every cleave heavy. It's pretty good if that's what you want to go for and you want to focus on cleave, but I think that's, again, specializing when I think that this character is better at versatility. If you do want to use a Branx, I think that's fine as well. Some players really like this weapon. For me personally, this weapon is way too slow. If you are going to run it 100% of the time, you are going to run Flak Unyielding. I don't know why Ogronomicon says Carapace Unyielding. I'm assuming because you can get good TTKs with lights with heavy hitter up with the attack speed increase, but I think that's just unnecessary. Just doing like strike down into strike down is fine. If you're going to use this weapon, typically either you're going to just do a push into a heavy, into a light, into a heavy, into a light, or you can do push attack into a heavy, into a light. Any of those options are completely fine. I think almost always, though, that H1 into L2 loop is like the best at dealing with like mobs that are a little bit bigger. So it's a good weapon. It's not for me personally because it's slow, and I think it struggles a little bit too much with horde clear and is just a little less consistent than the other two. But I can see how someone would say that this is their favorite pickaxe. I think that's completely fine. If you're going to run Slab Shield, almost always you're going to run Flak Unarmored. The reason why we're running Flak Unarmored is because with Brutal Momentum, we kill one more bruiser enemy, I believe. Some people are going to say you do Flak Carapace. I think that's completely fine. I think that it's unnecessary really to have that level of cleave with this weapon because it's so consistent, and if that's something that you want to do, that's fine, just to increase your effectiveness with Brutal Momentum on those Carapace and Flak targets. You always drop defensive on this weapon. I've actually seen some people talk about dropping crowd control instead of defenses, but I think that's maybe a bit of a meme and a joke, and maybe like top level Ogryn players are on a level of Nirvana that I'm not on, but I'm not there yet. But that's pretty much it you want for the perks. If you wanted to talk about blessings themselves, almost always we're running Brutal Momentum, Skull Crusher. Brutal Momentum in its current form is actually quite strong, affects really good breakpoints on a majority of enemies, and like I said, it leads to getting better cleave and more consistent cleave on bruisers and unarmored folk with this. Skull Crusher is always going to be like probably your best secondary. There's some people as well who will go Confident Strike if like you really are struggling with survivability, but with this weapon I think that that is unnecessary. Some people say that Opportunist is very good. I don't personally, but you could take it if you want to. Third weapon is primarily going to be for Bullgryn. We're going to talk about this weapon actually later once I get into Bullgryn, because we're going to start with Tauntgryn, but it's pretty good. The reason why I have Shovel here, Shovel's kind of an interesting weapon. Shovel, I think I wanted to mention more so as a meme than anything. I don't think that Shovel is going to be better than any of the other weapons in almost every environment. I think the only time that Shovel is better is if you're going to do rock cancel or weapon cancels for its main hits. What that looks like is going to be like essentially either you're going to swap to your secondary weapon after doing your primary hit, or alternatively you're going to switch to your rock if you're capable of doing that and immediately like go back. So like you do like a hit and then this and then back. If you do it well, it like looks like this. Rock cancel is technically slightly faster than weapon swap cancel, but weapon swap cancel is a lot easier. And if you don't want to get an RSI and you wanted to do this with heavy hitter, I think that's totally fair. One thing that I don't know if it's just inconsistent with this patch, I've noticed that the last 2 patches, this actually used to be very viable and I would say borderline broken. I'm not macroing, by the way, but you could if that's something you wanted to do macro. I don't think macroing is a good idea if it's something you're not capable of doing, unless you have like an RSI. I think that's fair, but like it's kind of just cheating, I think. Anyways, that's a conversation for another day. You used to be able to do the strike down into a rock cancel immediately by a heavy, and that would give you without thrust an almost one-shot breakpoint, like a 0.2 second TTK on crushers, and a one-shot breakpoint on maulers, where you could immediately go back into a heavy without like doing like this entire animation. Just long as hell. That seems to be gone the last 2 patches. I don't know if that was patched or it's an issue with servers. I know certain animation cancels like over time become on or off depending on how like the servers are working and stuff like that. But if anyone knows the secret sauce, if any Ogryns have like the secret Discord information on how to consistently do rock cancels, please let me know. This is typically what I run. This should be 60, this should be 80, but I haven't like invested enough in this weapon because I don't really think it's worth using. That covers those. Okay, ranged weapons. What are you going to want to do? I think that any of these weapons are fine. I think the worst of them is going to be the stubber. Second worst is going to be ripper gun. These 3, I think, depending on your skill level, are all going to give you a relatively consistent and even playing experience with either of these builds. Personally, I think that if you are very good at Ogryn and you want to invest the time, Rumbler Pickaxe is a phenomenal combo, or Bully Club Rumbler is a phenomenal combo. I think for most people, Pickaxe or Shield Kickback is going to be the most consistent and easiest weapon to use. The problem with the Rumbler is most people just don't use it properly. Yes, you do want to go for heads and like get your one-shots and everything, but a lot of the time people will like angle too far up or like deal with weird trajectory and the pill won't land in a way that the explosion actually does anything, or they like, I don't know, most people just don't place the pill correctly, and that's the biggest issue. Also, this weapon should be noted for like its use in staggering enemies, and like pill placement for stagger is important with heavy enemies. Almost always, to get good use of this weapon, it is more proactive than reactive. Like a lot of really good Ogryns that swear by the Rumbler are using it so that, like, let's say we have a stairwell in front of us. I know that Poxwalker is coming up in a couple seconds and there's like an infested wave around it. I'm going to drop this pill in that corner, wait for it to come up. It'll explode and kill, you know, a wide variety of enemies. Sometimes too, like to get decent one shots, you just can't aim for head even though you want to. Like, look at that, stuff like that. Being too close will also result in things like that happen. Sometimes you do need to aim at feet. I'm not going to go into like a wide video on Rumbler today, or a wide range of like use cases for Rumbler. I think that's better for like an edited video where I can show actual use cases. But just know that if you've used Rumbler and you don't understand why people say it's very good, it's probably because you're using it wrong. Typically, always, you're going to drop mobility. These are all too important. This is a very ammo-intensive weapon. You can't dump ammo. For perks, the conversation can be varied. I really like Unyielding Maniac. Most people are going to say that Maniac is unnecessary. The reason why we take Maniac a majority of the time is just to make this weapon a little bit more consistent. It makes it worse overall because not having flak kind of sucks if you're going to use this as a primary. But if you're using it as a secondary, I think Maniac is really good simply for the fact that certain enemies will not get one shot by your pills unless you have Maniac on. And I think that that's really important, especially if you're going to be using like Pickaxe, where you can get punished very heavily if you're not one-shotting flamers, ragers, and stuff like that. So something to keep in mind. But technically speaking, you can run Carapace or Flak here. Any combo of that is fine. I think Unyielding Maniac is the best though, because again, one-shot breakpoints. Having Unyielding on also, regardless of build, is going to give you a one-shot on Reapers, which I think is phenomenal. And it gives you a two-shot a majority of the time on Bulwarks, which is really, really good, especially because you can hit them on front of shield and still get a two-shot breakpoint. If you crit, I think you can get a one-shot breakpoint too if you have a variety of things, but that's, again, a conversation maybe for another day. Adhesive Charge, let's talk about blessings. So I have tested a lot with these blessings because I just didn't want to believe that this was still the best setup, but I think unfortunately it is. I really wish they would get away from continuous fire blessings because I think that they are unfun, and I think that while they're cool and all, and like just shooting your gun is good, it just isn't effective in most case scenarios. And I would rather use pills like sparingly in most builds, so Blast Zone just kind of gets a pass. Oh, sorry, I've been doing this for a while. Okay, Blaze Away, however, is good just because boss damage with unyielding and like shooting this nonstop if you really need to can be very effective. Obviously, too, if like you are in a panic situation, I find that having Blaze Away typically is going to serve me better than having Blast Zone. If you are going to take Blast Zone, I would say just go for the full Monty and do Blaze Away, Blast Zone together. You do lose, though, the 1-shot breakpoint on Reapers, 2-shot breakpoint on Bulwarks. There's a variety of things that you lose by not taking Adhesive Charge, which I think is a kind of a big mistake, unfortunately. A lot of people also say, Blaze Away, well, if you don't like shooting nonstop, why don't you just take Shrapnel? The close range is like really close. And while 4 bleed stacks is good, and like Shredders are really good because they give 4 bleed stacks, that close range and the inconsistency in how pills land makes it so that it is much less consistent than shrapnels. I think, though, shrapnel gains a lot of value if you're going to use it in combination with Pulverize, especially in certain environments like Civies and 3vegs and IIs. But like, we're talking about a lot of investment when I just like Blaze Away already, and I think it's consistent enough. But if you do like Shrapnel, please feel free to use it. It is definitely a quite a good blessing and can be made very good with skilled play. I'm not going to really talk about Kickback. I don't really know what there is to talk about Kickback. You point it, you shoot it. It's really strong. I've tried a number of different perks and combinations of those perks with different blessings. Honestly, I just don't think there's much to be discussed or thought about with this weapon. I have come to a conclusion on Flak Armored Maniac after trying everything, just because I don't really see a point in putting Unyielding on it. Maniac guarantees one-shots in a couple areas, or enemies or groups of enemies if you have Cleave and you're like faced with the Rager pack. Unyielding, like you're never going to shoot this into a boss really, in my opinion. Like maybe there's a conversation you want to go like Surgical full bore and you want to go behind a Beast of Nurgle and just like get a guaranteed full crit. Sure, maybe that sounds fun, but I don't know that it's that effective. Surgical, I think, unfortunately, honestly, I don't think any of these blessings are very convincing or interesting to me personally. I just don't like Blaze Away on this weapon particularly. I ended up with Surgical Run and Gun just because I like the close damage while sprinting. Sometimes you can make use of it and it gets an interesting breakpoint, and the reduced weapon spread at all times can also be pretty good with this weapon. Can also be a negative if you like using this weapon for like stagger rather than killing things. And if that's the case, then I wouldn't run this and probably, I don't know, swap it for full bore so that if you do want to kill things really up close and get your like closer to one-shot potential, you have this. But I think this is the most consistent combo. If you want to use Blaze Away, that's fine too. Moving on, Grenade Gauntlet I think is the most consistent weapon. Maniac is the same reason as all the other weapons. Flak is just for consistency on elite kills and gunners particularly. What you want to take for blessings is really going to be up to you. Almost always I'm going to say I use this weapon primarily for consistency. I think that the Rumbler is a better weapon than the Grenadier Gauntlet, but if you just want to ensure that, like if you don't have good like elite special disabler prio on your team, I think this is a really good weapon to consider. I like pinpoint targeting Glory Hunter just because sometimes you really do have to brace for a little bit, and getting toughness on elite kill with this weapon can be nice. I don't think that any of the others really matter. I don't like using this weapon for bosses, and I'm not like personally for shooting it multiple times. I like it as a precision weapon, so I don't use Blaze Away or prioritize those things. You should also normally take Blast Radius at 80, not melee damage. I only have this way because I was doing some testing with the melee damage and certain breakpoints with the Ogryn aura. But almost always this weapon is going to look like Maniac, Flak, pinpoint targeting, and some combination of Blaze Away, Glory Hunter, and you know, honestly, like reassuringly accurate probably is better than Glory Hunter nowadays. I honestly, I haven't done much testing. I don't particularly like Grenadier Gauntlet. I would assume with pinpoint targeting and certain things, this could be consistent. But this is probably going to be better because of how you're using the weapon. Anyway, if you want to use a Ripper Gun, that's fine. I think Ripper Gun is a decent weapon. I'll be honest, I don't like this weapon and I don't use it very often. Almost all Ogryns are going to argue between the different versions. I personally like Mark V, and most Ogryns like Mark V. You can use this weapon a variety of ways, whether or not it's to stagger, similar to the Kickback, or just as like kind of like a wipe weapon, or for damage on like one target in a close quarters situation. Can Opener is almost always going to be your premier blessing. Blaze Away is a good secondary blessing. There are a couple different options. Some people like Flechetti and swear by Flechetti. Some people swear by Fire Frenzy. Some people even talk about Inspiring Barrage or Cavalcade, and I think that any of those are fine. If you like a combination of any of them, it's fine. I don't think it really matters. Flak Maniac results in the most consistent experience for this weapon. You could do Flak Carapace if you really want to focus on that and lead into, you know, Can Opener and using this as a primary weapon against all targets. I think that's fine. Almost always you drop stability on this weapon because this weapon like is unstable already and it just doesn't really matter the way that you're using this weapon. It's kind of irrelevant. There's some Ogryns that do like 70 damage, 70 range I've seen. There's some that lower collateral to 70 in combination with stability. I don't think it really matters. I think you do whatever you like. I think that so long as you have like these three high, I think it's fine. That kind of covers all of the weapons that I would conceive you using. I'm not going to talk about heavy stubber. This is how I usually build my heavy stubber. I like the Atlas. I don't know. This ranged weapon just kind of pales in comparison to these ones. I think even this is better for like a gunlugger build. Lead Belcher is fun, and like shooting the Atlas really, really fast is cool and everything. But overall, it's kind of mediocre. Let's talk about Curios. 31 minutes into this video. Like I said, this is gonna be a long one. I've done a lot of testing, and I have come to the conclusion that 2 toughness, 1 max health is optimal. I think that triple max health is a joke. I think that although a lot of really, really good top level Ogryns swear by it, although health is a resource and should be used as a resource, like not leading into more toughness is silly. And with how much like damage reduction you get on Ogryn and how much toughness replenishment you get on Ogryn, having that high toughness and not bleeding so heavily into your max health is just better. A lot of Ogryn is feel, and I'm having difficulty putting that into actual words, but like I've tried, you know, all health, 1 stamina, 1 toughness, 1 health, double toughness, 1 stamina. For me personally, I found this to be the sweet spot. I think if you wanted to go for a really greedy, full-on optimization build and you didn't want to take some of the toughness nodes, triple toughness is maybe not a joke. Like if you want to get rid of Unstoppable, get rid of one of these, triple toughness is maybe not a total meme. Ease of use and overall just good. This is what I think. What do you want to use for the perks? This is something that again is very hotly contested. Personally, for me, on every Ogryn build, despite its cooldown reduction, I still run triple combat ability regen. I think that Ogryn's abilities are just very good, and you should use them as much as you can, and regardless of how often you can, as is, using it more is better. You know, I don't think that anything really matters for Ogryn enough to argue taking it over combat ability regen. Most Ogryns are going to tell you that toughness regeneration speed is going to be your best perk. I think that that is okay if that is how you like to play this game. I play this build particularly more as a diver and in like duo environments or 3vegs, and people get split up. I'm not going to get into like how toughness regeneration works. I think there's lots of YouTubers who have talked about this, including Tanner, and you can go to his videos. But although Ogryn is like built to sit in coherency and soak up toughness, through his teammates and be kind of like this linchpin for the team. I think if you want to compete with others, forgoing this strategy is what you're going to want to do. For ease of use, if you like this, that's completely fine. I think that's fine if you want to go triple toughness regen and get rid of all the combat ability regen. This is going to be much easier for like very minimal optimization loss. Personally, this is what I do though. You should always run triple stamina regeneration on Ogryn just because of how large your stamina pool is and how good stamina is, etc. When it comes to the perks themselves, you know, some Ogryns are going to say that you should run 5% toughness, stamina, 5% health on all of these. Personally, for me, I like the 1 max health and then 5% toughness on all 3 of these. Other things that you should consider, I think sprint efficiency is okay. I wouldn't go for block efficiency because of how large your stamina pool is already, but sprint efficiency just because of how slow Ogryn is and how much you burn through with your sprint. I think that this is fine, but I don't ever take it really. And I think that Gunner resist on Ogryn is like the only place that it's not a meme, but it's not optimal. Like with really good play, you're not going to be getting chipped by Gunners as much as you could be. You know, you're going to be able to make like decent use of your slides and like get to cover pretty consistently still on Ogryn. There is lots of cover Ogryn can still use on a majority of maps. Some of them you do get borked on. If you find that that smooths out your experience on Ogryn, that's fine. I think at the end of the day, so long as you have stamina regeneration on Ogryn, any combination of any of these is fine, and you will be able to perform at a decent level. The only other thing I mention or will mention is snipers. I don't actually run this typically. It is on here right now because I was doing some testing. With the amount of toughness that you can have with Ogryn, and the fact that gold toughness exists in this game, I don't think that this is really necessary. Like you very rarely take a large hit to your health on Ogryn against snipers. You can usually like tank like 3 shots with a semi-competent Ogryn build as is. This will mean that you could take a lot more though. And if you are someone who struggles with Ogryn and snipers, I think having one of these is fine. I don't personally do it though. Almost always all of my curios are going to be combat ability regen, stamina regen, and then toughness. Sometimes I do like the 5% toughness, 1 health. Let's move on to the actual builds and how all of this interacts with each other. Some Ogryns are going to tell you that taking this is unnecessary. I think that that's a bit silly. I think that there are plenty of situations where hitting one enemy is just not reasonable, and that getting like this is good. For 1 talent point, although it is not as good as this, with a majority of weapons, you're getting consistent toughness. I think that it is kind of silly just not to do. If you wanted to tell me that you wanted to drop this to take an extra toughness node, I would say, okay, I think that's fair, but I don't particularly think that you should. Almost every single Ogryn build, you should have all this. So I'm not really going to talk about them too much. Heavyweight is really good even in its nerf state. This is more controversial. I think if you were using, with any of these builds, Kickback or Rumbler, I think that this is not necessarily a mandatory node, but it is so good that I think that is worth foregoing other nodes, and you should probably prioritize taking it. Some people, even in these builds, like taking Steady Grip just so that they have a way of generating toughness while they're like hiding in cover with their ranged weapon and setting up for surgical or pinpoint accuracy, whatever. That's fine if you want to do that. I just don't value it because I find that when I'm playing Ogryn, I am always stuck in, so to speak. I play Ogryn either as I'm going to be in front of the team and I truly am going to be like the frontline wave clear, or alternatively, I am going to play with reckless abandon and dive into the backline and create as much chaos as I can for the enemy. And this doesn't help me in either of those situations. The difference between Rock and Frag Grenade. Some people undervalue Rock, some people overvalue Rock. I think at the end of the day, Rock is good. And I think that with most weapon combos, it does have a place. If you want to just kill a mutant really quickly, if you want to kill that, you know, Rager, if you don't have time to reload your gun, you want to pull a Rock out, kill a Disabler. If something's a little bit too far for you, like let's say you have like, I know it's difficult to conceive, but let's say you have this and like something's just a little too far for you to one shot. You know, a Tox Bomber, you can miss like that, or you can hit them. I think they're pretty good. They, you know, you get a decent amount of them. Overall, I think Frag Bomb is like better than the top level community gives it credit. neither of these really matter. I think that for Bully Club and quicker weapons, soften them up and going for Frag Bomb is going to be better for you because the impact bonus is kind of irrelevant. But I do like this on like heavier wave clear weapons for its impact bonus. And I would prioritize going this way over this way for that reason in those scenarios. But, 3 Vegs are the most difficult content and you get 3 frag bombs. Like, it's insane. It's just super good. A lot of the time too in the current meta, like, if you don't have a veteran, you're going to be the only person who uses grenades. Psychers aren't going to use grenades. 90% of zealots aren't going to be using grenades. Having someone that can soak up grenades and offer sort of like a final solution panic button with frag bomb is very, very good and very reliable, and I think that you should use it. If you want to rock cancel with certain weapons, then take rock. But that's a whole other level of overhead, and if you know how to do that, or you want to be doing that, or you're doing it consistently already, this video is probably of little use to you. Let's talk about the differences between Taunt and Bull Rush. What is just flat out better? I think that Taunt is better than Bull Rush. I think that Bull Rush is more enjoyable, and I play with Bull Rush more often because I'm not really that guy. This, with a lot of weapons, is going to lead to a much more consistent experience, especially with how good Trample is. With certain weapons like Bully Club, where you're like target capped and getting the base damage increase leads to really consistent breakpoints. But like, I can't ignore the fact that Loyal Protector giving 25 base damage increases like breakpoints for a whole bunch of players, including like Bonebreaker's aura. Like, these two things together on a bunch of weapons like DS, there's too many to talk about. Okay, my point is these two things together results in some very consistent and interesting breakpoints for yourself and others. And giving team utility is just good and is better than this a majority of the time, and it lasts 15 seconds, so it's quite long. Like, let's say there's a Crusher pack, you can really milk this and give a lot of bonus damage. Big Lungs is up for conversation. This is far less mandatory than this, and most very, very good Ogryn players I see don't run this because the situations that they're in do not require them to take it. There is rarely a time where this has value for those players because they're not going to be close enough to teammates to use Loyal Protector for its intended use case of taunting for allies, and they're primarily using it for the damage and stagger. And this node can be used elsewhere, but for ease of use and 99% of players, I think this is like an auto include if you're going to go Tauntgryn. The other reason why this is better than this in high level play is this more consistently deals with disablers, which is a major issue for Ogryn. And I think even for like partial ease of use, this is better for that reason. This is going to be able to, especially if you have this, allow you to stagger even green trappers and green dogs, and it's going to stop them from completing their animations. Like, you can delete Trapper Net, and you can stop green dog from leaping on you with this button. You can't with Indomitable. You can't go through net. Dogs, green dogs. I don't know if this is inconsistent or if it's maybe unintended, because I feel like Indomitable realistically should go through green dogs, but it doesn't, as far as I have experienced. They're capable of just latching onto you if you're like charging forward, and sometimes you want to get good value out of Indomitable, and suddenly there's a trapper, and it makes you stop your Indomitable early in either a situation that is less than preferable, meaning that you're stopping in a group of crushers, maulers, or an infested horde, or alternatively, you just get trappered or dogged because it's a silent trapper or a silent dog and you don't react quick enough, whatever it might be. So for that reason, I think that Loyal Protector is more consistent. I prefer playing Indomitable. If you're going to take Indomitable, you always want to go stomping boosts. Depending on your weapon, you might consider Trample or Pulverize. Personally, for me, if I'm using a quicker weapon like a Cleaver or Bully Club, I'm going to go for Trample. In all other scenarios, I think that both of these are overkill. If you're going to do civvies, Pulverize can be pretty good, especially if you're going to combine it with Rumbler, like I had mentioned. But overall, these things like see minimal value. Like, this base damage increase in most case scenarios is going to be unnecessary on things like Pickaxe and Shield. I would say this is like okay on shield though, and if you like it, like you can do that. It's still pretty reliable. Stomping Boots though is just really good. Getting a button where you can replenish all your toughness to full, create space, displace, give attack speed, give movement speed, and then, you know, in combination with that, give even more movement speed with Get Stuck In. Just leads to a very, very consistent cooldown and experience. And its base cooldown in combination with Bruiser is just really good. I would say this is like S+ tier and this is S tier. I know most people would say this is S and A in terms of combat ability, but I think that is the case. Batter is your bread and butter. Getting stacks of bleed on melee hit is very, very good. It leads to with pickaxes still some, you know, use case. This is probably much more necessary on pickaxe compared to other weapons like bully club and shield, but it's still pretty good, and we have to go this way anyways. Why do we not use crunch? I see so many people using crunch and so many people criticize me for not using crunch. Look at how long crunch takes to charge up. Here, let's do. For one, we can't use crunch with Slab Shield because we're animation canceling optimally, or doing heavy 1 into heavy 2, and it just ends up like giving us almost no breakpoints. But let's say we're going to use it on Devilish Pickaxe to like guarantee kill something with. Oh no, we have the Branx. This is not going to be. Hold on. Let's say you're like, oh, I want to use Crush so that I don't have to have all my buffs up and like ease of use with Thrust, Head Taker, or whatever to get one-shot breakpoints. Look at how long this takes. It's really, really long. And yeah, you're going to get more consistent breakpoints, but honestly, even if like you just want like good TTKs, doing this is going to be faster kind of, sort of, with buffs up and stuff like that. There's no weapon that I have experienced that this is worth taking because all of Ogryn's weapons either utilize animation cancels to make them effective, or they are too slow, and their damage bonus ends up being overkill, and the impact bonus is unnecessary. So like crunch just kind of doesn't have a use case. I'm sure there's going to be like one weapon that gets a meaningful breakpoint that I'm unaware of, that like it leads to better play in TTKs, but I have not yet experienced that, and I've never had a top level player tell me that. As an aside, if you were going to be using specifically Rumbler and Grenade Gauntlet, I would say pulling like Big Lungs and Unstoppable and doing this, I think, is like not a meme at all. I think that a lot of Ogryns undervalue their ranged weapons like often, and getting ammo reserve increase is worth it. No, you won't always be red as Ogryn with like a Rumbler if you have, you know, allies who you know aren't chugging up a whole bunch of ammo, but ammo stash just reduces the amount of times that happens. I think also the 5% reload speed is kind of nice on those weapons. You know, not super impactful, and probably in argument much less impactful than keeping Unstoppable Big Lungs. Like obviously these are far more impactful than this most of the time, but if you're really good and you play Ogryn the way that a lot of top level Ogryn players play it, these two become kind of pointless because you have enough toughness regeneration and toughness that this just ends up being overkill. A lot of top level Ogryns I've seen just take these two, which makes sense. But anyways, I'm not going to talk about Bone Breakers. It's really good, actually. I think that people undervalue how good this is, especially with weapons like DS and CB and Thunderhammer being as good as they are right now, and all of Ogryn's weapons relying on heavy melee attacks. This is kind of necessary. I don't think you, unfortunately, can really argue for either of these. This is overkill in most scenarios because most top-level builds have so much toughness replenishment that this just is wasted. And Coward Culling can, you know, have some interesting breakpoints with some of Ogryn's weapons for Leadbelcher Gunlugger, but obviously for this type of build, it just doesn't have any point. As we get down here, Too Stubborn to Die is pretty good. I know that this is a auto include for a lot of lower level Ogryns, and I would say if you're particularly poor at playing Ogryn, it's actually okay to take, and will lead to a pretty consistent experience. I don't personally take it because I just don't get below 33% health on Ogryn all that often, so it just is dead for me a majority of the time. It doesn't really have much of a point. Get Stuck In Bruiser is going to be sort of default on a lot of these builds. I think that you should always take these two. Get Stuck In, if you want to talk about how good it is, it depends on who you ask. I actually rather like it. Although it is only 4 seconds, you get your combat ability long enough or often enough that like it's a nice little bonus. Stun and suppression doesn't really matter, obviously, for Ogryn, in my opinion, but it's pretty good as like a little bonus. especially with Bullgryn. Obviously, far more than Loyal Protector, I would say, this synergizes. But it's necessary to get to Bruiser, which even in its nerf state is an auto-include in every Ogryn build, except for some like Gunlug or Lead Belcher builds. But even then, I think it's like a bit of a meme not to do so. We have to go this way because this is like pointless pretty much always. I'm not going to like talk about like the uninterruptible charging heavy melee attack stuff for Ogryn and Zealot. I think that like with even somewhat average play, this just shouldn't come into effect. So both of these kind of are pointless. Therefore, we're going to take these, and getting damage resistance per melee, bleeding enemy in melee range is incredibly good. Like incredibly good. It's a big reason why Ogryn is as durable as it is, which it needs because it is prone to getting shot. Whatever, doesn't matter, but it's good to have. Again, also the damage reduction while charging melee is nice. This is really good too, because a lot of the time, if you're dealing with chaff, like a lot of Ogryn players will sacrifice, because people get in their head, okay, this is going to be like a broad conversation about like how to play the video game in general a little bit. But a lot of people get in their head where they're like, okay, I need to prioritize like dodging and not taking damage because that's what I do on all my other classes. Ogryn can take hits. Like toughness and health should be treated as resources the same way that ammo is. And this is something that I want to talk about in like another video series about Darktide in general. Getting out of the logic of like, oh, 0 damage taken is what you want while you're playing Ogryn is something that you're going to have to do, because to make, you know, good use of Ogryn, you need to use your health as a resource to really eke out damage and things like that. And I think to do so is like not a problem. And most of the time, even if I have like, seriously, like if I play super greedy and I have like 1,000 damage, like let's say I really play greedy and I have 1,000 damage on my Ogryn by the end of the game, 90% of the time I'm not going down in that game still, even with all of that damage taken. You have a high health pool for a reason. You have high toughness for a reason. You need to make use of it. And if you were going to play scared and you're never going to take hits, and you're never going to like follow through on your charged melees and make use of implaceable, you're just kind of like, it just isn't... It goes against what Ogryn is good at to play it that way. It's okay to get hit, and it's okay to take damage, and you need to get over that a little bit if you're going to be very effective on Ogryn. Heavy Hitter is phenomenal. You should always have this up in combination with Slaughter, Head Taker, like I said, with a pickaxe. It just is great. Not much to say. You get a bunch of damage. Attack speed is incredibly important. These two, if you're going to run this, you need to run this almost always. The attack speed is just so useful for everything, every single weapon. You don't get a lot of attack speed on Ogryn for good reason, because your heavies are as good as they are. And this is a very good way of doing that. We'll talk more about this a little bit later. What could you do to this? If you're going to use a shield and you really, really like the entire, we'll say, Tauntgryn utility, I stand with my team environment, you could, you know, take Attention Seeker if you're going to run Shield. Even without Shield, Attention Seeker is pretty good in certain circumstances, but it's particularly good with Shield because you can block ranged enemies very effectively, obviously, and you can force them into going into melee and stuff like that. I don't run it personally, but you could. If you were to do so, payback time is actually better than people think, because again, you're going to get hit by melee attacks as Ogryn. People like to pretend like they're not going to, or they're going to take 0 damage or whatever. You know, just getting 20% damage every now and again can just lead to ease of use, and it's going to happen. So I think if, you know, you're going to take this, you could take this. Obviously not at the cost of these. And a couple things to note. I don't think that Won't Give In is worth your time because it's not proactive. But no pushover is actually better than some people think. This gives you a lot of stagger on your pushes every 8 seconds. I think this is really good, especially on Pickaxe, because, you know, you get this extra toughness node. Like, let's say you wanted to do like this. I think this is totally fair. Not getting the 10 toughness, like, you know, is something, and Lich Pin, you know, depending on how you play, is pretty good. But this gets you out of so many situations with the pickaxe that you otherwise wouldn't be able to deal with a simple push. It helps a lot with Rager packs when you need to. I really, really, really like it, and I think that if you do some testing with it, you might like it too. And again, all we're giving up for this is Linchpin, which I don't value personally because of how I play a majority of the time, and 10 toughness, because we keep the other 15 toughness node. Personally, for me, how I'm running this tree 100% of the time looks like this. I don't take this. I will go like either like this, or I will take this not this, and we'll go like this. So that's kind of all of the options with Tauntgryn. I'm going to talk about the other build that I really like and the build that I use a majority of the time and leads to a very consistent experience for me. I was like, where do I have this extra point? I really like Bullgryn. This is the build that I use, I would say 90% of the time. I typically pair it either with Rumbler or Kickback. I think it is a little bit better with Kickback just because you don't really have time to mess with Rumbler with this build, nor is it necessary to have that level of displacement or like delayed displacement when you have Bully Club. A lot of people don't like Bully Club. I think that undoubtedly, if you're going to use Bully Club, I like Mark III. Some people like Mark II because it has a little bit more cryo damage and stuff like that. This is just a very, very consistent, very versatile weapon, which leads to very good ease of use to me. And I think if you're a lower skill player, this is, in my opinion, the easiest build to play for Ogryn. It requires you to just oonga boonga and like think as little as possible, dive into backline and focus on just chaining together heavies. Bully Club, though, if you're going to use it, is going to require you to do an animation cancel, but it's really, really easy, and I think it's really easy for controller players too. Literally all you're doing is just heavy into a block cancel. Same as you do for shield. So for most Ogryns, this is not going to be like new, but a lot of Ogryns don't do this. And honestly, like with buffs up, like these are not like terrible TTKs. The worst of it, okay, well that wasn't even a heavy. The worst of it is going to be on crushers there. But like with your buffs up and everything, and if you do put Carapace on this weapon, it becomes quite good at it. The worst part of this weapon is that it's got a 3 target cap, which is something that they really need to fix, and I don't know why. It just makes this weapon much worse. And honestly, this weapon would be a very good weapon without animation cancels if it did have a target cap increase. The other part of this weapon, once you do have 5 stacks, doing with infested, especially if you put infested on this weapon, light attacks just leads to a very, very good, very consistent horde clear, and then you just, you know, heavy every once in a while to keep that up. And then anytime that you interact with any elites or you start getting a mixed horde, you just go back to doing heavies. There is even some conversation too for like not doing heavies and instead of just like doing lights. I'll let you be the judge of that on that. I think that level of optimization with this weapon is kind of unnecessary, and the whole point of it, the whole point of this weapon for me, for ease of use, is that you constantly can spam heavies, so you're making use of both of your heavy talents. This build has like unparalleled toughness regeneration, and I think that it makes like, okay. Sorry, I'm struggling. It makes like, so a lot of people are always going to point at Feel No Pain for ease of use on Ogryn, and I think that this build specifically just makes Feel No Pain feel completely pointless. You get like so much toughness replenishment as you're just doing this and DR, because you have consistent bleeds up on everything, that like you're just invincible so long as you're in melee. The only threat to you becomes displacers, and you can even make the argument that this weapon is better with Tauntgryn for that weapon, or for that reason, excuse me. But I really like this weapon primarily because, or with Bullgryn, excuse me, primarily because of Trample. Trample just gives you like really, 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 really good. I could like test it better with, I could test it better with Creature Spawner and like actually show you a 25 stack, but like when you combine how quickly you can attack with the heavy with this, with your bleeds, with the DR, with everything else, the increased attack speed from Indomitable, the base damage increase from Bull Rush Trample, and Get Stuck In's movement speed, you get like a few seconds, like 5 seconds of like pure bliss whenever you press this button, where you just delete everything in front of you nonstop. And you're invincible. I think this is like a very, very good ease of access build and very, very fun. But again, it kind of requires you to just Oonga Boonga and dive into backline. And if you're not confident doing that and not getting disabled, that might be a bit of a problem for you. But it's really, really solid. And I think you should try it out if that's the kind of build that you're looking for. In terms of the actual weapon, I know I got off of this a little bit. I prefer Infested Flak Armor just because Infested without buffs is going to result in just very consistent horde clear. that might be a little bit of a meme to you, and if you want to, you could take Carapace, but I find that like most of the time I'm dealing with Crusher packs is when I'm pressing Indomitable anyways, and I can delete them relatively quickly just by stacking Bleed on 3 of them and having the base damage from Trample increased. Blessings, typically you're going to run Skull Crusher as your premier blessing, and everything else doesn't really matter. I really like Skull Crusher too because of the heavy thing. Confident Strike, technically speaking, is going to be inconsistent if you're doing animation cancels. Weirdly enough, I've had experiences where I'm doing the animation cancels and I'm still getting the effect, but it doesn't seem to be showing up on HUD. I don't know what's up with that, and I haven't tested that recently, so that might have been particular to a specific patch. Haymaker also with Skull Crusher is pretty good if you want to like double down on the human-sized enemy mixed horde clear. I think that that's fine. I actually think Smackdown is also a good secondary blessing, as funny as that is. Although it is like 2 seconds, you can like weave it into things, and it does lead to some interesting clutch ability and like decent damage. Thrust I think is pointless because you're doing an animation cancel, but if you don't like animation cancels and you are going to use this weapon, it's pretty good. Momentum is a pretty good, alternative to Confident Strikes, specifically because of the 3 target cap thing and the fact that the chain hit seems to be inconsistent with heavy cancels. I don't think anything else is really that good. There's a lot of people who talk about Thunderous as being a good alternative to Confident Strike, or just as a secondary blessing, but I don't think that the 4 stacks of 2.5% brittleness, or excuse me, the 16 stacks of 2.5% brittleness, I believe, which is 40, really matters, because the majority of the time, by the time you're hitting that, it just falls off anyways, even if you're prioritizing using light attacks. I think that's pretty much everything. I don't know that I have much else to say. I think Ogryn is really, really good if you give it your time. I think any combination of any of these weapons, honestly, is going to lead to a pretty consistent result with decent play. I think if you want to go triple toughness because you like that crutch, I think it's actually preferable to max health sometimes. I think if you're going to pull away toughness nodes, you definitely should consider doing that. But I think that, Ogryn has like a high health value. You should take advantage of it. And having that 1 max health does make a bit of a difference in how much you can use health as a resource, leading to better damage and better uptime on certain things. I might re-record this video. I know this is really ranty. Sorry, it was like an hour of me just talking, and this probably got lost a lot. But still, if you made it this far, props to you, and you're going to be the best Ogryn in your lobby if you did and you paid attention, and you're going to give it the time it deserves. Feel No Pain is actually pretty good. I know that I'm like a little hard on it in this video. It does, just lead to a much more consistent result for defenses at the cost of being much less strong damage-wise. But this just leads to such a better consistent experience. You have much lower agency with Feel No Pain than Heavy Hitter, because you'll get overwhelmed by certain packs much easier, and you won't get such good breakpoints on things like Rager packs, Armored Rager packs, Crusher packs, Mauler packs. I think it's just giving up far too much for ease of use. But if you are the type of player that you're just dipping your toes into Auric Maelstroms as Ogryn, and you want to do this rather than this with any of these builds and how they're set up presently, I think that is completely fine, and you are allowed to do so. Just know that you are giving up a lot of agency, damage, and effectiveness to do so. But yeah, that's kind of it. I'm trying to think if there's anything that I missed out on. No, not really. I'm going to be making a Discord soon. I have another video also that I'm going to record in the next day or so and upload. And if you have any questions for me, either leave them in the comments. You can DM me on Discord. It's not hard to get my Discord. Once I do have the server up, you'll be able to just DM me there. Sorry. That Discord is going to be focused on like LFG play, discussion for just like general games, music, movies, things like that, everything like that. I don't really know how to end this video. We love Ogryn, don't we, everyone? Everybody's always telling me how great Ogryn is. We love Ogryn. Thanks for watching. Bye.